My dear people, how are you all? This is Venkat, a super excited PhD student from the University of Plymouth, UK. You know what? I really wanted to be there at the conference. I really wanted to be there with all of you, to be able to meet you all in person, to interact with you, to get to know you and your work. Well, unfortunately, I'm unable to. But thanks a lot to Nikos and his team. Nikos, where are you, man? Nikos. There he is. Okay. Nikos and his team, thanks a lot to you for agreeing for this video presentation to happen. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to my presentation, and for the next 15 minutes or so, we are going to be looking at the different factors that influence the research productivity of academics in an academic system or a higher educational system that is undergoing transition. And to understand this, I took the engineering institutions in Coimbatore, a very beautiful South Indian city, as a case study, and we'll be looking at the results. These are a part of the PhD that I'm. Without any further delay, I'd like to say hello to all of you in Tamil with a Coimbatore dialect. எல்லாருக்கும் வணக்கமுங்க. And hello to all of you from my research team and supervisors, Mike, Alexandra, Maria de Lourdes, and Yo. Let's get started. Well, before we start the presentation, I'd like to see Demetrev, the chair for this session. Demetrev, after I knew that you were going to be the chair for the session, I just looked at some of the works that you have done, and it's really inspiring. Taking mathematics to children and to the masses, fantastic work, well done. Demetrev, no, I'm not saying this because I want you to give me more time to do my presentation. No, not at all. It was really good. And Mirka, where are you? Mirka. Well, I really wanted to join you in exploring Athens, but well, anyway, hopefully you were able to mobilize some of the friends from the conference to explore Athens with you. That should have been really excellent. Well, but anyway, when I come to Slovakia, perhaps I can seek your assistance in exploring Slovakia. Well, coming to the What? Anyway, coming to the structure of the presentation, I'm going to keep this very traditional and simple. Initially, I'm just going to introduce this study. We'll be looking at the rapid developments that are happening in the Indian higher educational institutions. What is the need for this particular study to happen? We'll be looking very quickly at the methodology that I used to collect data and how I analyzed it, a few of the results, implications of the results, and then we'll conclude. My dear people, very quickly introducing this presentation. This presentation is based on some of the results that I've got based on research that I did, exploring what are the different factors that influence research productivity of the academics. Well, my dear people, this particular presentation might look like an odd man out in terms of the themes of the conference. Well, I have to be honest, I did have such doubts as well myself. But then when I looked at what the organizers had stated in their description, they were talking about technology penetrating all dimensions of learning, multicultural learning experiences, identifying challenges, exploring opportunities in terms of research, in terms of a fast learning environment. You see, that is where this particular presentation fits in. Well, I hope to keep you all awake and to keep you all interested in this presentation, especially after the excellent presentation by Joanna. There you are, looking at the learning enhancements, and also by Evis in terms of the Albanian educational system. Well, I've got a lot to live up to. Jumping to the current study, this particular study is about what are the various factors that influence the research productivity of academics in South Indian engineering institutions? What are the factors that influence in terms of enhancing and impeding the motivation of the academics to conduct research? I'm fairly certain some of you are already aware in terms of what is research productivity, what constitutes research productivity, etc. So I'm just going to quickly gloss over them. But then I understand that a lot of the audience might not be aware. So very quickly, research productivity is just the sum of all the research that a particular academic or a department had conducted or have published in a certain period of time. For instance, let us take Epthecia or Anna. Well, let's take Anna. Anna, where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay, Anna. Well, you'll be listening to Epthecia, Anna, and Mr. Fortune's presentations after the coffee break. Well, that happens after this particular presentation. Anyway, so how many papers have Anna written? How many conferences has she attended? How many books has she written? How many chapters has she written? How many people has she supervised in the last, let's say, 5 years or in the last 3 years? That would constitute her research productivity, or even quality of the research that she has conducted would also be taken into account. For instance, what are the types of journals that she has published in? What is the impact factor of the journal? How many people have cited this particular research that she has done? So it's just the sum of all. It's just adding all of them together and then presenting it as a number. That is the research productivity. My dear people, I'm fairly certain that you are already aware of the rapid changes and the developments that are happening in India as a country in its manufacturing and service-oriented sectors, on which already a lot of papers have been written and books published. So I'm going to skip them and just focus on the higher educational sector in India. As you can see from the graph on the top of my head over there, the rapid increase in the number of institutions that has just happened. To give you a statistical idea in terms of numbers, as you can see, there's been an increase of 205% in the number of colleges in the last 17 years, starting from 2000 till 2017. There's been an increase of 212% in the number of degree granting universities. There's been a phenomenal increase in the number of students enrolled in the last 17 years by 311%. Well, the figure 311% does not really do any justice to the number of students. As you can see below, currently there are 34,584,780 odd students who are enrolled in 2017. But this is just like half the population of UK. Like half the population of UK. But that is phenomenal. The graph over here, it shows the increase in the number of institutions from a long time. As you can see, until 1990, the growth in the number of institutions has been like pretty steady. But then after 1990, that is when India adopted liberalization, economic liberalization, you can see like a steep climb in the number of institutions. But then what really interests us is the steeper climb from 2000. As you can see, from 2000, and after that the number of institutions has just like increased, like wow, it's just skyrocketed. And this is something that has not really happened in a lot of countries, and so this would be a really interesting case study. Along with the increase in the number of institutions and the number of students, it is expected that the number of staff members will also increase. As you can see, there's been an increase of 269% in the number of teaching faculty or staff members in the last 17 years. As you can see from this slide and the previous one, it's fairly obvious that there's been a huge increase in the number of students, institutions and the staff members. But then what we really wanted to know was that in such a rapidly changing and developing environment, what would really motivate the academic staff members to conduct research? That is what we wanted to know. And well, the results that we had in terms of the number of research papers that has looked at the academic motivation to conduct research or on the research productivity of academics, well, you're in for a shock. In light of the previous two slides, I wanted to look at the various studies that have been conducted in India based on academic research productivity and motivation to conduct research. In order to do that, I took all the papers that were written from 1990 till 2013 and then reviewed all those papers. In that particular review, I was really shocked to see that only 33 papers had been written on this particular topics in all those 23 years. 33 papers for all those academics, for all those institutions and for all those students. This is a very, very low number. And also the review showed that only 4 of these papers had explicitly looked at academic research productivity or motivation to conduct research, and none of them were conducted in South India. So we were able to identify a gap in literature. This particular review was done in 2013. A couple of months ago, I read a paper written by Gopalakrishnan in 2016 in which he points out that India ranks as the top 13th nation in which the number of publications come out. Well, that is quite an incredible record in itself. But also he points out that India ranks in the top 2 countries in which papers are published in non-peer reviewed, low quality, vulturous journals which have very less concern for academic scholarship or the results. These are all paid journals which do not really think of the quality of the results or the methodology that has been employed to get these particular results. I was quite surprised, so I went back to this review that I did in 2013 and looked at these 33 papers in light of Gopalakrishnan's study. Well, I was really shocked. I was shocked to see that most of these 33 papers were published in one of those low quality paid and non-peer reviewed journals. Well, this really calls into question the quality of those very few papers that has been written on academic motivation and the research productivity of academics. Well, overall, this just shows that the quality and the quantity of the research that has been conducted in this area is not sufficient, and this is what we are planning to address. In order to better understand this problem and to fill the gap in literature, we looked at the research productivity of engineering academics in Coimbatore. Coimbatore is a very beautiful city in the south of India, full of friendly people. Well, as you have guessed, I am from Coimbatore. I'm not really sure if the mission responsible team that went to India went to Coimbatore or not. I think it was Beniel Monumento, the dude with the really cool hairstyle, and Sophia. I know that you went to Odisha, but if you had been to Coimbatore, you'd really agree with me. Well, my dear people, apart from that, as you can see from the graph, the graph which shows the increase in the number of engineering institutions in Coimbatore, well, it closely mirrors the increase in the number of higher educational institutions in India. That is one of the major reasons why we chose Coimbatore as the case study. Suseelan. Where is Suseelan? Huh? Well, Suseelan is also from South India, but then Suseelan might disagree with me in saying that Coimbatore is the most beautiful place in South India. He might say Aluva, where he is from, is the most beautiful city in South India. Well, do not believe him, believe me. I do not want to bog you all down with the different epistemologies, ontologies, philosophy, and the statistical analysis that we have done for this particular research. Let me keep it very simple. We have used a mixed method approach in which both quantitative and qualitative data were used. We have used tests of association to understand the relation between the demographic variables and the research productivity. We have used factor analysis to find out the different latent factors that existed in the approximately 54 variables that we had chosen. And also, we had done correlation analysis between the different latent factors and the overall research productivity. Initially I sent out online questionnaires from UK to India for the academics to fill. Well, but then there were no response whatsoever. So I had to travel from UK to India to collect the data. Well, I remember giving out around 650 questionnaires approximately, and the response rate was 50%. We checked for the reliability and the validity of the instrument, and that was quite good. Currently, I am also analyzing the interviews that I had conducted with the academics, and some of the results that we are going to discuss will include both of them. In order to understand the research productivity of these academics, we collected data on the various research that they have done over the last 5 years and plotted a graph. Our target population were those institutions started after 1990s. When we looked at the graph, it is evident that most of the academics conducted very little to no research at all, which is evident from the curve being shifted or skewed completely to the left hand side of the graph, whereas very few academics conducted a lot of research. We were keen to know what are the elements of the research productivity that the academics are focusing on. For instance, if they are more interested or focused in writing journal papers or supervising students, writing books, chapters, getting patents, conferences, etc. From the data, it was evident that most of the academics were just focused on writing national level papers, national level journal article papers, and conferences, and supervising undergraduate students, whereas their research productivity in terms of either supervising PhD students or master's students, writing international level journal papers or books, writing chapters, getting patents, etc., were very little to nothing. Well, such a low research productivity and not focusing on other elements of research productivity just shows a clear lack of focus from both the academics' point of view and the institutional point of view. In order to better understand the reasons for the low research productivity of the academics, I formulated a conceptual model. This conceptual model was used in factor analysis with all the 54 variables that I had to understand the different latent factors that influence the research productivity of the academics. This conceptual model was formulated based on a paper that I read in 2013 written by Professor Maria de Lourdes. well, one of the leading lights in this particular area. I've been in contact with her ever since, and the good news is I'll be working as an intern under her, looking at the research productivity of both Portuguese and Indian academics, comparing them with her. I'm really looking forward to it. After conducting factor analysis, I was able to identify 5 different latent factors that influenced the academics' motivation to conduct research and their overall research productivity. Before we go into the model, just to give you some statistical detail, the KMO's test gave a value of around 0.76, which is good. The Bartlett's test of sphericity gave me a value of less than 0.0001, which is excellent, and the model explained around 47% of variance, which is quite okay. Now, getting back to this model, out of the 5 latent factors, 2 of them, the collegial environment or the working environment, or the colleague with whom the academics were working, they influenced positively the overall research productivity. And similarly, the personal factors, which included them wanting to do research for a promotion, them wanting to do research because they wanted to get a higher pay or their social status, etc., that influenced their motivation to conduct research and to increase their research productivity. Whereas the other 3 factors stated over there in the model, they influence the research productivity negatively. Looking at the correlation table, I know what you're thinking. You're all thinking, what? There's a lot of numbers, I know, my dear people, this particular research is a bit in terms of educational science or the social science aspect of education. But trust me, this is the last graph or table that I'm going to show you with numbers in them. That's it. No more. Well, anyway, I wanted to understand. Oh, please, come on, just this one. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to understand the correlation between the different latent factors and the overall research productivity score. And as you can see, from the highlighted ones, it's just the working environment or the collegial environment and the personal factor which are significantly associated, but with very less correlation between them and the overall research productivity. Well, it shows that there are other factors in play which influence the research productivity of the academics, and that is what we intended to find through the interviews. Analyzing the interviews and the quantitative data, it was clear that not only these 5 latent variables were at play, but also few other factors were influencing the research productivity of the academics. Before I talk about the discussion, I just wanted to ask you all one question. Are you all listening attentively? Well, if I am concerned about the attention span and if people are listening to the conversation, well, I can imagine what Taivo, Sofiko and SM would be thinking, especially theirs being the last presentations of the conference that's happening tomorrow, or even what Evka and Marzenka from the University of Krakow would be thinking, theirs being the last presentation for today. Well, you know what, guys, I'll be listening to your presentation. Yeah, I will be. No? Well, thinking of Krakow, I just wanted to ask you this. Does the dragon of Krakow, does it still breathe fire? Looking at the results, we were able to identify 2 different latent factors which came up in the interview that influenced the motivation of the academics to conduct research. They were the elements of cultural identities, or as I call them, indigenous factors, and the academic dishonesty. The elements of cultural identities influenced motivation to conduct research positively, whereas academic dishonesty influenced it negatively. The different elements that constituted indigenous factors include things that are pretty specific to Indian culture, I would say. These are elements that were something like, I want to do research because I consider it as a God-given duty. It's my moral duty to conduct research. I'm conducting research so that I'll have a better reincarnation. I'm conducting research because I want to be a role model, etc. Well, these are some of the factors that came up. Well, these are some of the elements that came up in the elements of cultural identities or the indigenous factors. Academic dishonesty was on three levels. Academic dishonesty in terms of the staff level, management level, and the governing bodies. And whenever and wherever the academics perceived that there was academic dishonesty, then their research productivity was quite low. My dear people, also we were able to find a philosophical interaction between the elements of cultural identities and academic dishonesty. When a particular person considered elements of cultural identity to be very important to conduct research, then their academic dishonesty was quite low, and vice versa. And we were also able to identify that because of this rapidly increasing number of institutions and the rapidly evolving academic environment, people wanted to be highly competitive and to make sure that they distinguish themselves from others. That was one of the major reasons that they conducted research. We were also able to identify that when academics were motivated by external elements such as wanting a higher pay or wanting a promotion, etc., then their academic dishonesty tend to be high. Whereas when people are motivated by internal satisfaction, when they are internally motivated without any or with very less regards to external motivators, then their academic dishonesty was comparatively very low. But these results are actually quite interesting in a rapidly evolving academic environment. We were also able to see that research productivity of the academics increased with age, having an understanding that the respondents of this particular research, like 65% of them were less than 35 years old. Well, it is possible that their research productivity might increase in the future. But then the question is, do the institution have the resources? Do they have the skills? Do they have the necessary policies that would support the academics to grow in their research? Well, I should say currently, since this is a system in transition, currently there are very less to even no policies at all that are available in terms of the academics research motivation. So this particular research recommends that proper policies should be developed for the research of the academics in the future. As I told you in the beginning, this research is based on those institutions that were started after 1990s. Having an understanding that these institutions have very less research productivity, and also from the interviews it was clear that the academics did not consider that they had the sufficient skills to conduct research. Well, one of the questions that this particular presentation puts forward is there a necessity for these institutions to delve so much into research without building a very strong foundation in terms of research? My dear people, I'd like to conclude. I do not want to eat into your coffee time, you see. Well, I'd like to conclude by saying that this particular research has revealed that the research productivity of the academics in South Indian engineering institutions are pretty low, both in terms of quantity and the quality. The presentation also advocates that the institutions should review their research policies and how they are motivating the academics to conduct research. The policies that they form should emphasize things which include elements of cultural identities. It should reduce the academic dishonesty or the possibility of academic dishonesty in research, and also it should emphasize things, or it should give a clear route map for the academics in terms of linking their research productivity and their promotion opportunities for growth, etc. The presentation also advocates that the organizations or the institutions should try and formulate their own indigenous practices which are very specific to the culture and the type of work that is being conducted by the academics. It is no good that the institutions are just blindly borrowing a model that has been developed either in USA or in Europe and just try to bash it in a different culture. Developing indigenous practices or theories. Developing indigenous practices is not just for the academics, it's not just for the research productivity of the academics. No, it's also for youth work. Because youth work in India, I'm fairly certain one of the major results which I think mission responsible team would be stating is that youth work differs in terms of different cultures, especially them having explored 3 different continents. Your team has done a wonderful work. So even for youth work, this particular presentation advocates that indigenous practices should be developed based on the culture where the practices are going to be utilized. Well, I'd like to conclude by saying that a lot of work needs doing in this particular area, both in terms of academic motivation to conduct research and in youth work. My dear people, thanks a lot to all of you for having listened to the presentation for the last 15 minutes or so. My contact details are given below, both my Facebook and my Gmail, and I'd really love to get to know you as a person and in terms of your work, either in education or in youth work. If you think I can be of some assistance either in statistics or in youth work, well, I'd be very happy to assist you. I'm going to be taking questions from you all through Skype live. I think Nikos is ready with Skype. Nikos, my dear fellow, are you ready? Okay, so Nikos is ready. So I'll be taking questions from all of you, and I'm really glad to have made this video presentation. Let's interact together and let's work together if possible in the future. Well, I know it's very early, but still, Merry Christmas to all of you. Take care. Bravo.